player types and user types in gamification. Why not, I hear you say? Player types and user types are nothing new in the world of gamification, and they're nothing new in the world of games or in design or in business. And they've been around for ages, models and frameworks and taxonomies and categorizations. In gamification, we tend to focus on one particular type of player types that are stolen from games called the Bartle's player types, but there are more. There's Amy Jo Kim's social player types, there's Playnomics, there's Brain Hex, there's lots of them. But Bartle's became a focal point for gamification because it's very simple. It consists of 4 different player types. You have the achiever, the socializer, the explorer, and the killer. Now, the reason I talk about user types and player types is because I created my own. I created my User Types Hexad. And the reason I did is because Bartle's player types have one critical flaw when it comes to gamification. They weren't designed for gamification. In fact, they weren't designed for general games. They were designed for multi-user dungeons and MUDs in the 80s. They describe player behaviour seen within multi-user dungeons and nowadays MMOs, massively multiplayer online games, because there are very specific types of player in those, and even those 4 types weren't enough for Bartle. They expanded into 8 types eventually. Now, Bartle himself has criticised the use of his types outside of massively multiplayer RPGs because the context within which you apply them is wrong if you're not using them on MMOs and MUDs. Doesn't mean they can't work, it's just that there are some inherent problems. One of the biggest ones is the killer type. Now, the killer, people often say, well, they're the winner, they like to be the best. Unfortunately, that's not quite true, because the killer type, and this is from Bartle himself, I've spoken to him, he's written about this, he's spoken about it himself. The killer type wants to hurt and destroy people. Bartle told me that they might well act like a socializer and become your best friend, because when they betray you, it's all the sweeter. Now, when you consider this in real life, and you consider this in a business or an enterprise situation, and they're sociopaths and psychopaths. Now, that's quite a difficult sell to your CEO. Oh, we're building this system because we want killers in the system because they're the winners. Oh, what does a killer do? Oh, they want to destroy people and hurt them, and oh, shit, yeah. So I decided to come from a different angle. Rather than observing behaviour, I came from well-known motivational theories, self-determination theory being the main one. And I created a simple framework called RAMP, which focused on relatedness, autonomy, mastery, and purpose. And from that built 4 user types, 4 intrinsically motivated user types. With relatedness, we have the socializer, who wants to connect to other people and wants to feel connections to other people. With autonomy, we have the free spirit, who is creative or an explorer, who wants to explore the boundaries of the system. They don't want to be confined by the rules. They want to go and build things and find things and that sort of stuff. The achiever, who is focused on mastery. They want to achieve things, they want to learn things, get good at things, be the best at things. Not to be competitive necessarily, but because they want to prove to themselves that they are the best, they enjoy learning, they take great pleasure from learning. And the philanthropists. Now, philanthropists are motivated by altruistic purpose. There are 2 types of purpose that I speak about, altruistic and meaningful. Meaningful purpose, everyone has. It's looking for that meaning in what they're doing. They're driven by that sense of meaningful purpose. I do a story called The Little Cog in the Big Machine, which I'll come to later. But the point is, with the philanthropist, we're focusing on altruistic purpose, that feeling that you're giving of yourself, selfless time. You aren't wanting rewards for being helpful and for doing things that people might find useful. Take Wikipedia for an example, where people donate hours and hours and hours of their time to create a wiki that really you would expect to be paid for, but they don't. They do it because they feel that they're giving something back to society, they're being helpful. Some gamification designers would call this the epic meaning and the epic calling. So there are 4 intrinsic types: socializer, free spirit, achiever, and philanthropist. Now, gamification is very sort of commonly held hand in hand with rewards and points and that. So, true to that, there is a player. There's a player type, yeah. Didn't think it through because I was talking about user types at the time. But the player user type is the one that's attracted to rewards and the shiny things and wants to collect the prizes and the points and the badges and wants to be on the leaderboard and will do things for rewards. And they're extremely useful at the start of a system when they're being onboarded, because that type of behaviour is exactly what you need to get people into the system. And the final type, the disruptor. Now the disruptor is very difficult to explain, but sits in two basic categories. The ones that want to destroy stuff and the ones that want to improve stuff. The destroyers and the innovators, and a few other little bits and pieces around it. The ones that want to destroy things are really dangerous to a system, and they often want to destroy things because at some point they've been disgruntled by something and want to prove that it's wrong, so they set about trying to prove it's wrong by breaking it. On the flip side, the innovators and the ones who want to improve things are really useful but hard to manage, because if you get them wrong and you don't give them the tools they need to improve stuff, then they start to break it because they can and they're fed up. But they're basically motivated by change and innovation and disruption of the system. That's what they want to do. So those are my 6 main user types. Now, something that I alluded to very early on is the context within which types are used. And something that's really important to understand is that user types are not concrete. You can't categorize an individual into one user type and expect that to be that's them, that's all they'll ever be, that's all you can think of. Because we are very complicated systems, we are complex systems in fact, and when you try and categorize someone you're going to be wrong because they're going to change. Bartle noticed when he was developing his player types that people evolved during their time within a system. They started as a killer and came out a socializer or whatever it might be. And the same is true of gamified systems. People don't stay the same the whole time. They don't stay the same between systems. You might be a free spirit in a system that allows creativity, but you might be an achiever in a learning system. You might start off as a disruptor and slowly become a free spirit or an achiever. Things change over time. They change depending on the system, they change depending on the moods. So one of the key things to think about with player types and user types is that they are just a tool. They are one of many tools. They aren't going to give you the answer to how people are going to behave specifically. They give you an understanding that people are different and some clues as how to motivate certain behaviours. So when you're looking at using the user types, I have a survey. And the survey describes what type of user you are. But that's contextual to doing the survey and how you were introduced to the survey and all that sort of stuff. It is useful, but it's not the be all and end all of who you might be. So when you're designing your system, how do you use player types and user types? Well, you could survey people at the beginning of the system to get an idea of what they are. And then you could survey them during the system to understand how they're evolving. And that does have some pros and cons. The pros are you get a very good evolving system. The cons are you have to build a very good evolving system. The other way to look at it, and the way that I personally use it, is to describe the behaviours that I want. So if I want someone to answer questions, then I need to encourage philanthropist type behaviour, altruism, to answer questions. So I build a system that encourages that. But I also need people to ask questions, because the philanthropists won't be asking questions of themselves. So I also need probably achievers, because achievers want to get the answers to things and want to learn. But also you want achievers because they're going to be the experts in certain topics. So you also need to encourage achievers to behave a bit like philanthropists. But neither of these two are going to talk about the system. So you need socializers to try and evangelize the system for you. You also need to get people in, so you probably need some kind of system that onboards people and maybe some rewards and some badges and things like that, just to encourage people at the beginning. So you also want to encourage player type user behavior. So there's a lot of things you have to consider about how it's all going to mesh together, and focusing on just one type is going to limit your system, and focusing on every type is going to make your system very ungainly and quite hard to build. So it becomes a real balancing act between what you need and what you can actually do. There's no definitive answers to this, but like I said, my advice is concentrate on the behaviours. Now in this series of videos, I'm going to talk about each type individually and describe a couple of mechanics that work really well with them, And then I think in the final video I'm going to briefly introduce the dodecad, which is all 12 types, but only as a point of interest rather than something you're probably going to actually use. So, next up we're going to start looking at socializers. I'll see you soon.